ဝတ်သုံးပါးအကြောင်းပြောခဲ့ပါတယ်များနားလည်အောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့အရာသုံးစကားနဲ့ပဲဘုန်းကြီးရှင်းပြခဲ့ပါတယ်စာရွေးလောက်တယ်မဟုတ်ဘဲနဲ့လူတွေမှာဖြစ်နေတဲ့လက်တွေ့ပေါ့ဒီအကြောင်းအရာလေးတွေနဲ့ဆက်ပြီးတော့လည်းပဲပြောခဲ့ပါတယ်ဒီနေ့တော့အဲ့ဒီဝတ်သုံးပါးဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲရတယ်လဲဆိုတာဆက်လက်ပြီးတော့ရှင်းပါမယ်
Yesterday, Sayadaw talked about the 3 cycles of suffering, and he explained them with examples and using conventional terms conventional terms. And he also tried to connect the theory to the actual practice. Today, Sayadaw will go deeper into the subject.
Kurega, you lola ze pini de Upaga woye Upaga would hammer a jung in it. A Jose Yunan diary body. The watch over a Pietro Yunan diary. Through Pisem ha Labido, Mashulushi, Madibo, 3 Matalushi and Madibo. A Madibu Sabido. Always a core Kilesa Sabido Pieto. Madida Soraga. Yonaya the Bawari Matida, Chauju Seponi Matida, through ye Chinyari body, since Madida, and always a Sabido, Kilita Sapshipai.
Our present bodies are extensions of this cycle of resultants. And if one is unable to notice with keen mindfulness what is happening at any of the 6 sense doors at the moment of occurrence, then the failure to understand their true nature, which is that there are only mind and matter in all phenomena, that they occur according to the law of conditionality, and they exhibit the 3 characteristics of impermanence and so forth. And the failure to understand all this through keen mindfulness, of course, constitutes avidya or ignorance. And that ignorance is one of the aspects of the cycle of kilesas, of defilements.
Either do I chabaga she thought Dugatis at hated the Arigo, Mandai Metiro, here the accounting mirror. Salo and Naporoda, Swellam Ubaran le Poroda, Taya Swellan as she Ubara, and Timavi Swellan had a sheet.
As we mentioned yesterday, through ignorance and the delusion that what is suffering is actually good and satisfactory, very naturally craving will arise, and in its wake, clinging and attachment too will follow. So this, of course, starts the ball rolling, and the cycle of kilesas is set moving.
Dugatisa hated the Amandamidi, Dugat Pichi, a chow, the Mudia Disa, Taya Hu, Taya Swella Hudima Pola, always a leve, the Naya Chaya, Nineboli, အကြောင်းတရားကြီးတွေမှာပယ်ပြီးသားမဖြစ်တော့ဘူးသူကဖြစ်လာတာပဲဒါမှဒီတော့ဒုက္ခသစ္စာပိုင်းခြားမသိရင်သမုဒယသစ္စာလည်းပဲပယ်တဲ့အနေနဲ့ပေါ့လေမသိတော့ဘူး
Failure, of course, to understand the true nature of all suffering things, which means failure to understand the first noble truth of suffering, will automatically mean that one will be unable to overcome or put aside craving, which is the cause of suffering.
ဒုက္ခသစ္စာလည်းမသိသမုဒယသစ္စာလည်းမပယ်ဘူးဆိုတော့ဒီခိုက်တာမှာအဝိဇ္ဇာတနာဥပါဒံပေါ့လေကိလေသာမချုပ်ကိလေသာတွေဖြစ်နေတယ်ဆိုတော့ကိလေသာတွေမချုပ်ဘူးပေါ့တရင်ကនិရောဓအဲ့ဒါကိုလည်းပဲဆက်မှုကိစ္စမပြီးစီးတော့ဘူး
So we can see the whole sequence of events, how ignorance of the first noble truth results in the inability to let go of suffering. To let go of craving, which is the cause of suffering. And of course that constitutes the second noble truth, which of course again leads us to observe that failure to understand suffering things, failure to let go of craving will not produce, will not produce a momentary cessation of kilesas. So the third noble truth, which is the cessation of suffering things, cannot be achieved.
အဲ့ဒီခိုက်တာမှာဖြစ်နေတဲ့စိတ်ဟာလည်းပဲအကုသိုလ်စိတ်တွေပဲအကုသိုလ်စိတ်တွေဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒီအကုသိုလ်စိတ်ထဲမှာပုဗ္ဗဘာကမဲ့ခေါ်တဲ့ပုဗ္ဗဘာကမဲ့ခင်ခေါ်တဲ့ရှေးပြေးမဲ့ခင်ထိုက်တဲ့တရားတွေလည်းပါမသွားဘူးတိလမဲ့ခင်လည်းမပါဘူးသမာဓိမဲ့ခင်လည်းမပါဘူးပညာမဲ့ခင်လည်းမပါဘူးတိလတွေပြည့်နေပြီဆိုရင်တော့တိလမဲ့ခင်မပါဘူးပေါ့အကျဉ်းတန်းဆုံးကိလေသာတွေဖြစ်သွားပြီစိတ်တည်ငြိမ်မထိန်မှုဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဝိရိယတတိသမာဓိမဲ့ခင်မပါဘူးလည်းကားပဲစိတ်တွေလေးနေတာအောင်လည်းမစိတ်နဲ့ချိန်သားမကြိုက်ဘူးဆိုရင်မသိတော့တမန်သင်္ကပ္ပမဲ့ခင်နဲ့သမာဓိတိမဲ့ခင်ဒါလည်းမပါဘူးမဲ့ခင်၈ပါးအရိယာမရဲ့ရှည်ပြေးပေါ်လေပုဗ္ဗဘာကမဲ့ခေါ်တဲ့ဥပဒနာမဲ့တွေလည်းပါမသွားဘူးပါမသွားတော့အဲ့ဒါတွေလည်းပဲပွားသိတဲ့တရားတွေလည်းပဲပွားခြင်းကိစ္စမပြီးမြောက်ဘူးအဲ့လိုဖြစ်နေတယ်
So failure to understand the first truth, inability to let go of the cause of suffering, which is craving, and the non-occurrence of cessation of suffering things from moment to moment leads the mind to just arise in the space of unwholesome activities. And when the mind is in a grip of unwholesome mental states, of course there is no opportunity for the Eightfold Noble Path to be developed. The Eightfold Noble Path can again be seen in three aspects. The first aspect is the path factor group called the Sila path factor group, and the second is the Samadhi path factor group, and the third is the wisdom path factor group. If one is assaulted by unwholesome mental states and manifests them through transgression of moral precepts, then of course it's very clear that the Sila path factor group will not be or cannot be developed or cannot even occur. When the mind is dispersed and distracted, thinking about all sorts of sensual pleasures and evil thoughts, there is no opportunity for the mind to be, there's no effort put into the mind to concentrate on what's happening at the moment. So there's no right effort, there's no right mindfulness, and there's no right concentration, no collectedness, no one-pointedness of mind. And that of course means that the concentration path factor group is again unable to occur. Finally, without this effort, mindfulness and concentration, we know that right aim and right view, which constitute the wisdom path factor group, also will not have the chance to happen.
အဲ့ဒီသီလမဲ့ခင်သမာဓိမဲ့ခင်ပညာမဲ့ခင်นี่မိရဲ့တဏ္ဍာမှာဖြစ်ပွားစေပါမှခုနအကျမ်းအလတ်အနုဖြစ်တဲ့ကိလေသာဝတ္တိပြတ်မှာပါပြီးတော့အကျင့်တရားကမဲ့ခင်၈ပါးအကျင့်တရားကမရှိတော့ဒီကိလေသာတွေပဲပြတ်လိမ့်မယ်လေကိလေသာတွေဆက်နေတာကိုဆက်နေတာပေါ့
It is only if we can activate these three path factor groups of the Eightfold Noble Path within ourselves that we can have the chance to overcome the Kilesas, to battle with the Kilesas.
Di hari kilitari mapjabu po kilitari beseka sani de.
If the Eightfold Noble Path is not, the factors of the Eightfold Noble Path are not activated within us with respect to whatever is happening from moment to moment, then the Kilesas will have a ball, so to speak.
She right ma do I have what people need a young and diary in a sabida making she ba a gentia mapuabu so ye Vipassana level she can't sabida since it my people, my yemo, my bezo, my bezo was a lochi Kilidari, a piashin nine area mess bravo. Since Kilidari, a piashin in area met, Totapati, Metagarami, Nagami, Ratame, Eralema Povo. Bowsolution or the Kilidari ha Lolo says, Satan appeared down my Julo Noma. Miuni ne kaini ne nudia kilida riaro nudia kilida dadiaro makomo.
So it goes without saying that if these Eightfold Path factors are not being utilized in each moment, then it will not be possible for Vipassana insights, intuitive insights to occur. And the noble path consciousness of the stream entrant also will not be able to occur because it is actually the ultimate, not really ultimate, it's actually the end of a first series of successive Vipassana insights. And of course, if the noble path consciousness of the stream entrant does not occur, then the Kilesas, or a certain group of Kilesas, will not be uprooted. For the Kilesas, or rather a certain group of Kilesas, can only be uprooted by the noble path consciousness. And if that is the case, then we can understand that this whole cycle of Kilesas, this whole cycle of suffering, will just keep on moving, and one will not have a chance to escape from it.
အဲ့ဒီလိုအမှန်တိုင်းမသိမှုတွေဟာအထက်ထနေတာပဲအဲ့ဒါမောဟပတ္တလလို့ခေါ်တယ်မသိမှုတွေကအထက်ထဖြစ်တယ်လို့ထို့အတူတောင်းတတာယာမှုတွေစွဲလမ်းမှုတွေကလည်းပဲအထက်ထဖြစ်တော့တာပဲမြို့ဓာတ်အနေနဲ့ပေါ့လေအဝိဇ္ဇာတဏှာဓာတ်အနေနဲ့ဘဝဆက်ဆက်ကပါလာတာတွေအဲ့ဒါတွေကဥပဒနာညာမဖြစ်သေးရင်အာမနေဘူးမိညာမဖြစ်သေးရင်အာမနေဘူးပပနေတာအဲ့ဒါတွေအဲ့တော့ကိလေသာဝဖြစ်လို့ရှိရင်သူ့အကြောင်းပြုပြီးတော့ကာမကိုလည်းပဲဖြစ်တော့တာပဲကာမကိုဖြစ်လို့ရှိရင်ဝိပါကကိုလည်းပဲဖြစ်တော့တာပဲဝိပါကကိုဖြစ်လို့ရှိရင်ဘဝဆိုတာလေးရထားတော့ငါပဲဆိုတဲ့အစွဲလေးတွေကဝင်ပြီးတော့တဖန်ကိလေသာဝတ္တိထပ်ဖြစ်ပြန်တယ်ကိလေသာဝမှာတခါကာမဝတ္ထပ်ဖြစ်ပြန်တယ်ကာမဝတ္ကနေပြီးတော့ဥပါကကိုဖြတ်ထပ်ဖြစ်ပြန်တယ်ဒီနည်းနဲ့ပဲမပြတ်မလတ်ခြာလပတ်လဲပြီးတော့နေတာကိုပါဠိလိုဝတ္တခေါ်တာပဲဥပံကာဆွိနှိပ်ထားတဲ့ခါကျတော့လဲနေတယ်လို့ပေါ့လေမရတော့ဘူးလဲနေတယ်လို့အဲ့ဒီလိုပါပဲ
From time immemorial, these mental elements of ignorance and craving and clinging have followed us from life to life, from existence to existence. They are pretty persistent. And as long as we do not develop the Eightfold Noble Path, they will continue to be persistent, and their strength will not be weakened. Through the practice of the Eightfold Noble Path, activating the Eightfold Path factors within ourselves at every moment, then one can weaken these persistent mental elements, and with the successive development of Vipassana insight and the eventual attainment of the noble path consciousness of the stream entrant, then certain aspects or certain types of kilesas will be uprooted forever. In the absence of the practice of this Eightfold Noble Path, however, moments of delusion assail us from every sense door, and this momentary and repetitive occurrence of delusion follows us like a shadow. With delusion and ignorance, of course, as we said earlier, there is bound to be craving and clinging that follows. And of course, with the turning of this cycle of kilesas, of defilements, it will lead to more action, doing good things or bad things, wholesome or unwholesome, skillful or unskillful activities. And that, of course, will start in motion the wheel or cycle of karma. And inevitably, once karma is created, in an appropriate time, the resultants will occur. And so the link goes on and on and on. And that's why in Pali it's called a vata. It's an unending and vicious cycle. It's like a chain reaction, and it goes on and on and on without any stop.
ပုံစံတစ်ခုထုတ်ပြရမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဆိုကြပါစို့တာယာချွေးတဲ့အတန်လေးနားထောင်နေတဲ့အခါအဲ့ဒီခိုက်တမှာထင်ရှားတဲ့ခန္ဓာဖြစ်တဲ့နာကိုလည်းပဲမသိဘူးနာရုပ်ကိုလည်းမသိဘူးအတိုက်တဖြစ်တဲ့အတန်ရုပ်ကိုလည်းပဲမသိဘူးကြားသိတဲ့သဘောလေးကိုလည်းပဲမသိဘူး10မိနစ်အဲ့ဒီပေါ်မှာစိုက်ပြီးတော့အမှတ်မပါဘဲနဲ့အတိမပါဘဲနဲ့နားထောင်လို့ရှိရင်10မိနစ်မှာစက္ကန့်ပေါင်း60ဆိုတော့တစ်စက္ကန့်မှာမတိတစ်ခုပေါ့လေမောဟတစ်ခုကြနဲ့တွေ့ရင်အချိန်ပေါင်း60ဖြစ်သွားတယ်မောဟနောက်မှာလည်းပဲตาယာမှုဆွဲလမ်းမှုတဏှာပေါ့လေပါနေတယ်ငါကကြားနေတာပဲဆိုတာပေါ့လေကြားနေတာငါပဲဆိုတာပေါ့လေသူကလည်းပဲအချိန်ပေါင်း60ဖြစ်သွားမယ်10မိနစ်ကနေပြီးတော့2မိနစ်3မိနစ်5မိနစ်5မိနစ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အချိန်ပေါင်း300တဏှာဤသာနားထောင်နေလို့ရှိရင်အချိန်ပေါင်း3600ပဲဒီမှာအဲ့ဒါဘယ်လောက်များနေသလဲဆိုတာတွက်ကြည့်ပေါ့
Well, to give you an approximate understanding of the magnitude of this delusion, the magnitude of moments of delusion, you can perhaps identify your own experience. For example, in hearing. At the moment of hearing, there occurs a couple of things like we talked about before. There is the receptor element, which is your ear base, the striker element, which is the sound itself, and the ignition element, which is consciousness, the hearing consciousness. At the moment of hearing, if one is absent-minded and one does not note that moment of hearing with penetrative and accurate mindfulness, then delusion is bound to occur. We think that I am hearing, or the hearing is I, and so forth. Assuming, for example, well, Sada is just making a very rough calculation, assuming that there are 60 moments of consciousness in a minute, one consciousness per second. If we are listening to some music or some sound for a minute, and we do not look at that, watch the sound, watch the hearing process with mindfulness, then what happens? If you listen to it for a minute, 60 seconds, 60 moments of delusion. If it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, half an hour, how much will that be? That's just a very rough calculation to show you the magnitude of moments of delusion that can occur.
Edi jare khaita ma the sha de khanda daita punta ha dukkha thissa de be. Edi dukkha thissa le ma ti bu. Ma ti do ja mu ne sa bi do akaung thin bi do ta ya mu thamuriya thissa le be ma ngye mu ma pe bu. Di khaita ma Kilesa wo le be ma pyat bu. Pi do Mekkin 7 pa a chin taya le be pwa bi da ma phit bu. Tithine diari tibu, pedine diari bebu, saitine diari saipu, puadine diari puabu sura. Bama mashiudi kaita. Era tisa liba matida lukhavare.
So at that moment of hearing, referring to the last example that we were talking about, the truth of suffering things is present. And what are they? What is the truth of suffering things? They are the three elements that are present in the process of hearing, at the moment of hearing. The ear base, the sound, the hearing consciousness. And if we do not know these elements for what they are, mind and matter, empty processes which occur according to the law of conditionality, processes which exhibit characteristics of impermanence and so forth. If we don't know all that through an intuitive insight, then we will not be able to let go of craving, the second truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, which is bound to come with delusion. If it's a sound that is very pleasing, we are bound to crave for it, to hear more. And of course, with craving there comes clinging. There is an attachment to this sound, a sort of a possessiveness. We don't want it to go away, we want it to stay. And that, of course, leads us again to the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering things. How can there be cessation of mind and matter, of suffering things, when at that moment one is so filled with craving, so filled with attachment, clinging, and enveloped by that cloud of delusion? It's not possible. And of course, nothing really, no special mention need to be said of the last noble truth, the fourth noble truth, which is the path that leads to the liberation from suffering, to the cessation of suffering things. Because at that moment, as I mentioned earlier, none of the Eightfold Noble Path factors are present. So the first noble truth is not known, and that's ignorance. The second noble truth, the cause of craving, the cause of suffering, which is craving, is not let go of. The third noble truth, cessation of suffering, is not attained. And the fourth noble truth of suffering, which is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, is not developed. And as a summary, we could say that means the ignorance of the Four Noble Truths is present.
ဒီတော့ဒီကိလေသာတွေပွားစီနေတာဟာခုနနားထောင်လို့ကောင်းတဲ့အရာသာပေါ့လေကာမဂုဏ်ချမ်းသာခေါ်ပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီကာမဂုဏ်ချမ်းသာလေးကနေပြီးတော့ပွားစီနေတာပဲ
The sound that one hears, if it's some sweet music or some pleasant sound, will automatically stimulate craving to arise when one is clouded by delusion, ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. And that craving is said to be an indulgence in sensual pleasure. That craving for that pleasant sound is an indulgence in sensual pleasure.
ကျန်တဲ့မြင်မှုနားမှုစားမှုထိမှုအဲ့ဒါတွေလည်းပဲကြားမှုနဲ့စပ်ပြီးတော့နှီးမိပြီးတော့သိဖို့ပါပဲ
The other senses the other processes of sensing, like seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling sensations in the body, and knowing, thinking. All these can be understood in the same way.
ဒီနေရာမှာပို့ပြီးတော့ထင်ရှားအောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့ဥပမာနာဥပမေယလေးတွေရှင်းပြီးတော့ပြောပြရစီ
So I would like to further illustrate the point that he's making by giving a few examples.
ကဘာမြေကြီးပေါ်မှာပေါက်နေတဲ့တစ်ပင်အမျိုးမျိုးနဲ့တတ္တဝါမျိုးရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
So I would like you to compare the various and multifarious types of animals, beings, and the various species of plant life.
အဲ့ဒီပေါက်နေတဲ့တစ်ပင်တွေကတစ်ပင်တစ်ပင်နဲ့တတ္တဝါတူဦးတယောက်ရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
You may like to, it may be useful for you to compare, for example, a growing plant and a living animal or being.
တစ်ပင်လုံးပြန့်နှံ့နေတဲ့အဆူအစီးတက်ပေါ့လေအဲ့ဒီအဆူအစီးတက်နဲ့ကိလေသာကိုရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
And there is a sort of a vitality that permeates the whole body of the whole trunk of the plant, the stem, the whole of the plant, as well as that of the animal or living being. That should be compared to the defilements, the kilesas.
တစ်ပင်ရဲ့အဆူအစီးတက်ကြောင့်အတိအစန္ဒဖြစ်လာပုံနဲ့ကိလေသာဝတ်ကြောင့်သို့မဟုတ်ကိလေသာအဝတ်ကိုအမိပြုပြီးတော့ကောင်းကံဆိုးကံကာမဝတ္တိဖြစ်လာပုံရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
Ati. Atina.
ဒီအစံပေါ့စီပေါ့
You may also compare the fruits and seeds that are born by the plant based on the presence of that quality of vitality, in the plant. That can be compared to karma,
Kamawata.
the cycle of karma, of activities.
အဲ့ဒီအတိစန္ဒကြောင့်နောက်ထပ်အပင်သစ်ဖြစ်လာပုံနဲ့ဝိပါကကိုရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
The cycle of resultants, of karmic resultants, can be compared to the seeds or the potential the karmic resultants or the cycle of karmic resultants can be compared to the sprouting of a new plant from the seed of the parent plant.
ဘဝတိစလာဝန်စားပြီအဲ့ဒီတပင်လုံးမှာပြန့်နှံ့နေတဲ့အဆူအစီးဓာတ်တွေကိုမြေဥရုရေဥရုအလေးရောင်စသည်တို့ကပွားစည်းစေပုံနဲ့ကာမဂုဏ်ချမ်းသာကကိလေသာအဆူအစီးဓာတ်တွေကိုပွားစည်းပုံရှင်းကြည့်ပါ
The nourishment that the plant gets in order for the vitality to be there. Nourishment like the sunlight and water and minerals and so forth. These can be compared to sensual pleasures, the cycle of Kilesas, sensual pleasures which feed and propel the cycle of karma, of karmic activities.
Mi uru ye uru, eri uru re jao, tibin ha associated di puasi ni yen. Team have, Tiruchi, Asia Neviro, a bende pim have, a bende pilaluci, a bendema associated di pala yang. The Pavia dipping a cheat favor the car team have. Tiruchi, a city area, a bende pim have, a bende, Diluni never tipping ha a semapia. Pini the lune. Konakilita Kama Upagao. The watch of a pipian needed. Kamago Chanda Lidiga, Neviro, Kilita Wasibo, Kilita was young Kama, Kilita was young people, Kama with people. Kama was Ubaga with people, Ubaga would dego, Kilita, Susita dia, Anutea and in a Kappa. Now, Bibita Susita di people, Tini never Chalva Lene Chipo.
So, one can summarize what we said just now. And we can say that the nourishment that is needed for healthy growth of the plant, needed for the vitality of the plant to be there, nourishment of sunlight and air and minerals and water and so forth, is the starting point, or is a point in the circle, in the cycle, where it feeds the vitality, and the vitality in turns will be the cause for the fruit, for the plant to bear fruit, and the fruits will again produce seeds, and the seeds will sprout into new plants, and the new plants will receive the same sort of nourishment, which will again make the vitality continue or perpetuate the vitality and produce more fruits and so forth and so on. This can be seen very clearly in this example, and it's the same for this whole cycle of suffering. The sensual pleasures continually bombard us, feed the karmic link, or feed the karmic cycle of activities, and that, of course, again will produce its fruits. The cycle of resultant will be set in motion, and within the seeds lies the dormant kilesas, which have not yet been rooted by the noble path consciousness. And with a new life, these dormant kilesas will again start the whole cycle moving. And so you can see again the whole unending and perpetual link.
Diao Yiviro Buddha Guranga won't come in or Hojata de Cheshivare. Hojata de Hojabungaro Chetunam Bequeria Sechana, Nan water Abdi Weda, Iwamida Diga Madana Tandawita and Tandrita, Mama Siva Tuma Kansare. Pekuro Tisa Liva Tiago, Vipassana Nyane, Leo Swamati Jinja, Lagao. Manyam Shin ပွင့်လင်းစွာမသိခြင်းကြောင့်၎င်းတက်လျောက်တိလောက်ရှိလျားတဲ့တန်တရားဆက်ဝိုင်းကြီးကိုငါဖျားရောတင်ချေသားတို့မှာတင်ချေသားတို့ပါလဲခဲ့ရပြီတဲ့ဝန်ခံပြီးတော့ဟောကြားထားပါတယ်
Understanding this whole process very thoroughly, the Buddha once said, "O bhikkhus, both you and I have been running around in this samsaric mess for so long, for so many aeons, from time immemorial, because we have not been able to penetrate into the truth of suffering, into the Four Noble Truths, through Vipassana insights, and we have not been able to penetrate into this Four Noble Truth through the Noble Path Consciousness."
ဒီတော့ဒီစကားကိုကောက်ချက်ချလိုက်လို့ရှိရင်မဲခင်7ပါးအကျင့်တရားမပွားများလို့ဝိပဿနာမဲခင်အရိယမဲခင်မပွားလို့ဝတ်သုံးပါးစတ်တယ်ဆိုတာဒီမှာသွားပြီးတော့ကောက်ချက်ကြပါတယ်ဒါကြောင့်ရှစ်ဖြာမဲခင်မပွားလျင်ဝတ်စဉ်အမျက်စားဆိုတာမြတ်စွာဘုရားဒီတိုင်းပဲဟောပါတယ်
So we can see that if the Eightfold Noble Path is not walked on, if the Eightfold Noble Path factors are not activated within us, one will not be able to cut through this cycle of suffering. And as a corollary, with the developing of these Eightfold Noble Path factors, activating them within us, developing them, we can cut through these vicious cycles of suffering.
ဒီတော့ဝတ်သုံးပါးစပ်ပုံတော့ပြောပြပါပြီအဲ့ဒီဝတ်သုံးပါးပြတ်ပုံဆက်ပြီးတော့ပြောပါမယ်
Sayadaw has been talking at some length about how these three cycles of suffering keep on linking to one another, keep on perpetuating the vicious cycle of samsara. Now, however, he would like to talk about how these vicious cycles can be cut through.
ဆိုကြပါစို့တစ်ပင်တစ်ပင်နောက်ထပ်မျိုးမဆက်စေခြင်းဘူးဆိုရင်အဲ့ဒီတစ်ပင်မှာရှိနေတဲ့အဆူအစီးဓာတ်တွေကိုတဖြည်းဖြည်း6ခန့်အောင်လုပ်ဖို့ပဲအဆူစီးဓာတ်တွေပြတ်အောင်လုပ်ဖို့ပဲလိုပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါကတော့တစ်ပင်တတ်သူရဲ့လှုပ်ဆောင်ချက်ပယောဂပေါ်မှာတည်နေပါတယ်
To carry on the same imagery that was used just now, if we want to make sure that that particular species of plant is exterminated, then we can do so by seeing to it that the vitality of the plant is destroyed or is not given the chance to grow or to exist.
အဲ့တော့တစ်ပင်တတ်တဲ့နည်းတွေကတော့အမျိုးမျိုးရှိပါတယ်ဘယ်နည်းနဲ့ဖြစ်ဖြစ်နည်းမှလမ်းမှပေါ့လေတတ်တယ်ဆိုတာအဆူစီးဓာတ်ပြတ်အောင်လုပ်လိုက်တာပါပဲအဆူစီးဓာတ်ပြတ်ရင်အဆူစီးဓာတ်ပြတ်အောင်လုပ်လို့ရှိရင်မြေစီရေစီးနဲ့လွတ်အောင်လုပ်ရတာပါပဲမြေစီလည်းအဆက်အသွယ်မရှိဘူးရေစီလည်းအဆက်အသွယ်မရှိဘူးမြေဥရုရေဥရုကလွတ်သွားရင်ဒီတစ်ပင်ဟာအဆူအစီးဓာတ်တွေဆက်ပြီးတော့မရတော့ဘူး ငါကရှိနေနေတဲ့အစုစီဓာတ်တွေလည်းတဖြည်းဖြည်း6ခန်းသွားတော့မှာပဲ6ခန်းသွားရင်ဒီသစ်ပင်ဟာအတိမတိနိုင်တော့ဘူးအတိမတိဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်နောက်ထပ်အပင်သစ်လည်းပဲမဆက်နိုင်တော့ဘူးဒီနည်းနဲ့ပဲဒီသစ်ပင်ဟာအဆက်ပြတ်သွားဖို့ရှိတော့တာပဲ
Of course, there are many ways that one can destroy a plant, but whatever method that is used, the principle is to cut off excess to nourishment, cut off excess to the soil, to water, to mineral intake, to sunlight and air. And if that is done, doubtless the plant vitality would be destroyed. And once that happens, the whole plant will wither and die away, and there will be no chance for a further perpetuation of the species.
ဒါလိုပဲယုံနာဘဝဆင်းရဲတွေအထူးအပြင်ကုဏကိလေသာကာမဥပါကကိုခေါ်တဲ့ဆင်းရဲတွေပြတ်စေခြင်းရဲ့ဘာကနေစပ်ဖြတ်မလဲဆိုတာဘုန်းကြီးတို့ပြိဿစဉ်းစားကြည့်စမ်းပါဖြေလို့ရှိရင်လည်းဖြေကြစမ်းပါပြိဿစီရအဖြေလေးဘုန်းကြီးလိုချင်ပါတယ်
So I would like to ask all of you here to think about how you would go about exterminating the seed of Kilesas, how you would go about cutting through this 3 cycles of Kilesas, of karma and karmic resultants.
ကြိတ်တယ်လို့ဖြေကြစမ်းပါ
You may answer that question as you like.
Kilesa အစိုးစီဓာတ်တွေဟာကာမဂုဏ်ချမ်းသာတွေကပွားစီနေတယ်ဆိုတာတော့ဘုန်းကြီးကတော့လမ်းလေးဖော်ပေးထားပါတယ်
Well, Sayadaw says that he's going to give you a hint. He says that that this whole cycle of Kilesas is fed by sensual pleasures. That's the hint. Sayadaw is hoping that somebody will answer so that it will save him the trouble of doing it. Well, Sayadaw hopes that all of you will feel like members of a big Dhamma family and will not feel at all inhibited to give your opinion.
Well,
since nobody's going to answer, neither is the Sayadaw going to answer today. I think the hour is up. Making Shiva Jindia Maboye would do my Saturday Surabody. It is a guardian, she needed it. Sarah had earlier said that if one does not practice or activate the Eightfold Noble Path factors within oneself, then it will not be possible to cut through the cycles of suffering. So it seems pretty obvious.
အဲ့တော့ဒီနေ့ကိလေသာစပ်ပုံလောက်သာပြောပြီးတော့အခုကိလေသာပြတ်တဲ့ဤတတိပဋ္ဌာန်လမ်းကြောင်းကိုပြည့်ပြည့်ဝဝရှောက်နိုင်ကြပြီးတော့မဂ္ဂင်7ပါးအကျင့်တရားတွေမိမိတို့တဏ္ဍာမှာအမြဲမပြတ်ဖြစ်ပွားစေခြင်းအပြင်မဖြစ်ပွားလို့ဖြစ်ခွင့်ရှိတဲ့ကိလေသာအစီတွေကိုတဖြည်းဖြည်း6ခန်းအောင်လုပ်ပြီးတော့ကာမဥပါကဝဒီကိုသုံးရှင်ရဲ့3ပါးစိတ်ကံတိုင်းမလပြတ်အောင်ကြိုးစားပြီးတော့နောက်ဆုံးအရိယာမေဖြစ်ပေါ်ပြီးတော့တန်တရားဝပြတ်နိုင်လောက်တဲ့ဒီကြိုးစားပွားများအားထုတ်နိုင်ကြပါစေကိုယ်ကိုလည်းပဲအဖြေရှာနိုင်ကြပါစေ
So I hope that all of you will be able to have a good walk on this Eightfold Noble Path as you cut through the cycles of suffering with your sharp mindfulness from moment to moment, and that you will eventually be able to realize the bliss of nirvana. He hopes also that somebody will come up with an answer tomorrow.